this is just one of the many city dialogues we are doing as a new way of working for Eurocities to inform, connect, and facilitate exchange between cities on this very unprecedented crisis of coronavirus and the impact that we have to mitigate. We will start with a presentation by OECD sharing the interesting findings from a very recent analysis on the territorial impact of coronavirus in cities. And especially the economic, social, and fiscal impact. Very, very interesting. We will have the opportunity to ask questions to OECD directly following their presentation. And then the second part of our meeting today is an online, very interactive discussion on the questions that we addressed already in the concept for this dialogue. So this is our agenda for today. Maybe just a quick introduction of what Eurocities has been doing. So Guillermo, please the next slide. The next slide. Yes, so Eurocities has, as many of you know, has published a joint statement by mayors asking for solidarity and cooperation between all levels of government. This joint statement is on our website and you can follow. We set up this COVID news platform where we share live updates from cities as well as EU updates. And already we've built quite an impressive overview of measures, both economic and social measures, so you can follow there. And there's also a forum for exchange if you have more quick questions that you want to address. And as you can see, we have city dialogues to exchange know-how on COVID-19 measures. And this is a very important new tool we are using to share experiences and also be inspired. So that's what we do. And now I am very, very delighted to have with us today the colleagues from OECD, Paolo Veneri, Song Jin Kim, and Isabelle Chatry, who will kick off the city dialogue with a short presentation on the findings from their analysis on the territorial impact of COVID-19. I am very, very delighted that OECD has agreed to share with us these findings and to have a very open discussion with cities. Before I give the floor to the colleagues from OECD, just a reminder, please, while you listen to the presentation, you can ask already questions in the chat box that we will collect and address in the Q&A part following the presentation. And if you experience any technical issues, again, you can write in the conversation box. So thanks again, and now I give the floor to the colleagues from OECD. Paolo Veneri, you have the floor.
Everybody, and first of all, thanks to Eurocities for giving us the possibility to contribute to this discussion. So we are now today providing, I think, what it could be let's say a big picture of this analysis by looking at a bit of what happens in OECD countries, especially in OECD regions and cities. That's what our core business is basically. We cover three. We look at the COVID-19 crisis from three angles: the economic impact, social impact, and fiscal impact. In the few slides that I will present, I will have kind of more a view from the economic impact, and the presentation I will make rather than looking at let's say what the actual impact so far has been in regions. I would provide more some insights on the differential potential impact that will emerge after the crisis due to the lockdowns and that have been implemented in the different places. Why I do this? Of course, because across countries, comparative, let's say, data on, at regional and city level, they come out with some lag, and therefore what we did is doing some estimates, making some assumptions to provide a picture of what could be the potential impact. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Basically, the next slide with the map.
Yes, we can see. Yes.
Yes, good. So basically, what we know is that urban and regional economies are hit differently. We want to understand a little bit what are these differences, what are the regions that are hit the most, the cities that are hit the most, etc. We know that there are several factors that affect how a specific place could be hit more or less from lockdowns due to the COVID-19. There are many considerations. One is the industrial composition, the economic structure of the place. There is also what the extent to which the place is exposed to globalization, is open in a moment where everything, I mean, basically shut down. So also the global trade, and also, of course, other characteristics more related to the labor market, and of course to the policies implemented by the places. There are many aspects. So what we did first of all is just focusing on, let's say, the industrial composition. So we look at the let's say the sectoral mix that each place is more kind of specialized, or it's characterizes each region basically. So the idea is very simple. We wanted to map all OECD regions, as you see in the map that is shown in this slide, with a share of total regional employment that could be potentially at risk from the lockdown. So we are not talking about, of course, job losses, but we are talking about really the upper bound of the amount of jobs in each region that is actually potentially at risk if a lockdown is implemented. What we did is that we built that based on a previous work done last month by the OECD Economic Department, where the Economic Department identified what are the key sectors that are affected from lockdowns. If I can mention one, for example, let's say art and entertainment, food, accommodation, so tourism, air transport, retail, wholesale trade, professional service activities are specific sectors in which there is the assumption made that the output of this produced by these sectors will decrease during the lockdown from, I don't know, 50% to 70% or even more. So we took the classification from our colleagues from the economic departments, and we look at what is the detailed sectoral composition of each region, and then we estimated what is the percentage of the total employment in each region that could be considered potentially at risk. So this is what the map shows, and the first thing that the map shows is that there is not homogeneity within countries. On average, in OECD countries, there are about 20 percentage points of difference between the region that is, let's say, hardest hit and the least hit from the crisis. And for example, if you look at Europe, the starkest disparities can be found in Greece, for example, in Slovak Republic, in Romania, or France. These are 4 countries in which we clearly observe that there are some regions with relatively high shares of risks and other with low shares. If we take Greece, for example, while central Greece only emerged having slightly more than 20% of total employment in the region that can be potentially threatened by lockdowns. In specific places, regions like the South Aegean islands, for example, that are extremely touristic places, so more than half of the jobs is potentially threatened by lockdowns and by this crisis. Similarly, in other countries, we have differences. For example, in France, and this is a pattern also observed in many other countries, is the capital region, is the large cities. Due to their specialization on not only tourism in some cases, but also, I mean, trade openness, retail trades, art and entertainment. There are many activities that are prevalent in those specific places, specific areas, that put actually those specific places in a disadvantaged position with respect to others in the short term, so during the time of the lockdown. If we go to the next slide, basically we show for each country that we covered in our analysis, we show what is the region that is most hit. If you can go to the next slide, please. I still see the map, but you should see.
Yes, we see the tourist destinations. Yes.
Yes, so basically we can see here in this slide what are the regions that are most hit by country, and the objective is that we can show basically what is the weight of each sector of activity in that specific region. We have cases like at the bottom of the graph, you can see the South Aegean islands in Greece, for example, where tourism is clearly explains why this region emerged has been hardly hit by the crisis. But we have also other patterns, like I said, many capital regions, and this is explained a lot by retail and wholesale trade or professional activities, some specific activities that are predominant in let's say in the large cities or capital regions. There are also some places that are specialized in wholesale trade that are more integrated also in the global trade that can be considered more a risk. And this is let's say the purple part of the bars. So this is a bit already a picture of the potential impact in the labor market, but which is a negative impact, of course, we are talking about. But also I would like to complement this with a few other considerations on instead some elements that still come from the economic structure, in a way, of the regions, but that represent actually factors of resilience to the COVID-19 crisis. So while we see that some sectors are particularly hit, and more hit than others, and that can determine some effects on the labor market, if you go to the next slide, I show that we also have made an estimation of the extent to which it is easy in each place to telework. So basically, with this COVID-19 crisis, basically the crisis has forced us to run the largest experiment of teleworking and online schooling ever seen, basically. So the easiness, I mean, with which it is possible to perform occupations in a remote mode can really represent a factor of resilience in this period. So what we did is building on a recent, let's say, more academic work that has been done that basically classified all possible occupations. I'm not talking about sectors here, but we're talking about really occupations. So what are the tasks of the jobs that people have? We classified each occupation by their level of teleworkability, we can call it. And we then looked at what are the occupations in each region, and we estimated a degree of teleworkability. So the share of total employment in a region that could potentially work in remote mode. And this actually is also quite different, also within countries. There are on average 15 percentage points between the share of people who can telework. And if we compare just on the aggregate cities with the rural areas, here there is a difference that is advantageous for cities, in the sense that cities on average have at least 9 percentage points, let's say, of employment that can work in remote mode using this classification. Just to make an example, I mean, if you look at two occupations that belong to the same sector, for example, academic researchers and janitors working in universities, then you see that one can telework and the other no, but they belong to the same sector. So it's really, we are talking about the task content of each job. And here, in this case, the figure is the picture is very different from what I presented at the beginning, in the sense that these are the cities, and the capital regions often have, as you can see in this slide, the highest degree of teleworkability. And if you go to the next slide, we can also basically show a clear correlation, let's say, between this degree of teleworkability and the skill set of the labor force. If you could go to the next slide.
I think there is a time lag that we see the slides, and
I realized that. So you see a very clear correlation that basically the extent of teleworkability reflects the skills of the regional labor force. Here we show in the horizontal axis basically the share of the regional labor force that has a tertiary education. And on the vertical axis, we have the teleworkability, the share of teleworkable jobs. Allow me to use this expression. So as you can see, I mean, there is a clearly correlation. Therefore, I mean, education basically can represent an element of resilience in these cases through the channel of telework, not only through the channel, not only through other channels, let's say. And then finally, I would conclude with my last slide, if you can go to the next one, which basically shows that with this, as I mentioned before, largest experiment of teleworking, let's say, and online schooling ever seen, it is still very important to have the right infrastructure for, let's say, the right digital infrastructure. And this actually, we wanted to show you, this is not related to the COVID crisis necessarily, and it's data that are updated last year, but we can see that if we look at how, what's the coverage of the optical fiber, of the high-speed internet access, for example, within countries, we can see again quite substantial differences, not necessarily with the pattern cities versus non-cities, or at least not so clear, but we see, I mean, in several countries that these disparities are even more than 50 percentage points. Of course, having the, I mean, let's say, facing this situation with a good digital infrastructure, let's say, combined with the right skill set and the occupations that can be performed remotely, can really represent an element of resilience to, in a way, compensate for the possible impact that I documented in the first slides. And this, for me, I would like to then pass the floor to Sujin for other considerations.
Yes, thank you so much, Paolo. Very interesting so far on teleworkability, digital infrastructure, and yeah, explaining the variations in the regions and cities. Now we will hear from Sojin Kim. Sojin?
Yeah. Yes, I hope you can see me and hear me. Hello, yes, everyone. Yes, we can. So, as Paolo explained, while we did not make a sort of overall evaluation of the economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis on cities in the OECD, we did look into different drivers, and that's what Paolo explained to you. Now we might want to turn a little bit to the policy side of it, and here, looking at 3 examples of cities that went into their own, self-evaluation of how the COVID-19 crisis is impacting their economy. So, for example, Montreal published a study recently, and their approach was based on 2 different scenarios. A first, let's say, very optimistic scenario where the shock on employment would remain relatively short and last only until the second quarter of this year, leading to a drop of only 0.8% over the entire year, and a second, more pessimistic scenario where the shock would last until at least Q3, which would mean a drop of employment of 3.5% for the entire year. And of course, the disruptions in supply chains, the different recessions in the city's major trading partners are expected to weaken, exports, investment, and tourism. So there will be repercussions in the medium term. The city of Reykjavik in Iceland also set up, a special team in charge of evaluating the impact, and particularly on the city's financial situation. I don't know the results of their evaluation at this stage yet, but the City Council has prepared an action plan which includes a range of stimulus measures to try to counteract this impact. And a third example here is the city of Phoenix in the US. It's a city that gets more than 30% of its revenue from sales tax only. And before the virus hit, the city was projecting a surplus of $28 million for the upcoming fiscal year. And now, of course, its projections are announcing a deficit of $26 million. And that's in the best case scenario if the pandemic only lasts until July. But of course, the longer it lasts and the worse the deficit will get. So, of course, not many cities foresee a rosy economic future at the moment. And if we can go to the next slide, please. the magnitude of the economic downturn is such that no government can really handle this crisis on its own. This really requires all hands on deck, and local action is really critical, both to implement the national stimulus packages, but also to complement them where possible. So there's a wide range of policy instruments that are designed to keep businesses afloat, and governments are pumping, hundreds and thousands of cash into the ecosystem. So emergency relief funds, for example, have been set up pretty much everywhere. And going forward, there are also free consulting services that are being offered, particularly to make sure that SMEs are informed of all existing support schemes and can benefit from technical assistance or expert assistance to rebound in the medium term. Many cities are also granting tax breaks, freezing rents in municipally owned spaces, offering a moratorium in some cases. Another stream of support is to give loans, either at a very low or even zero interest rate, subsidies, exceptional advance payments, anything that can help firms maintain their payroll and preserve their liquidity. And finally, what several cities have also been doing is to encourage local production and shorter distribution networks to avoid, for example, wasting tons of perishable fresh produce, and to leverage these urban-rural linkages in a way. And this has actually led some urban residents to revisit their consumption patterns, and this might trigger a long-lasting behavioral shift in a way. So there is no magic bullet to solve the economic downturn. The OECD has estimated that every month of lockdown means a drop of 2 percentage points in annual GDP. But we can go to the next slide. Now that Europe is slowly starting to lift restrictions, it is also the right time to draw the lessons from the unexpected effects of the lockdown and seize the occasion to come out greener and smarter out of this crisis. So you might have seen all those amazing pictures of how traffic bans, have led to a record drop in emissions and cleared the skies blue above China, India, but also our European cities. And several studies, including one from Harvard University lately, show that higher levels of pollution in cities were associated with higher levels of deaths from the virus, as pollution causes, respiratory conditions, and makes urban residents more vulnerable. So cities really can't go back to business as usual. They need to get out of this pandemic more resilient to future pandemics, because there will be others and other shocks. And this is an opportunity to build back better and fully reimagine public life in cities. If not, we might get out of lockdown with more urban sprawl, because people are scared of urban density, for example, and with higher dependency on individual cars, if people are anxious about public transport, and this might set a time bomb and make cities more vulnerable again. So we should be thinking if some emergency measures can be made more permanent, for example, how to mainstream the emergency measures that were taken to protect the homeless. So how to mainstream those into housing programs, ensure more effective ventilation in buildings, for example, design better courtyards to allow social distancing in the short and medium term, and really improve well-being in the long term. Then most of your cities, I'm guessing, are investing in expanding, cycling lanes, which now are sometimes even called Corona lanes. This will give a huge boost to soft mobility, green mobility, and cities are really working on this all over the planet, from Bogota to Milan and many, many more others. This should also be an opportunity to shift urban planning further away from the concept of just mobility, which focuses on moving people from point A to point B, and get closer to the concept of accessibility, which is about improving people's proximity to jobs, schools, services, and reducing travel time generally. So Paris, for example, has been championing the idea of the 15-minute city, whereby within a 15 minutes radius, you can go to work or get to a hospital or do your shopping. Then lockdown has also shown to what extent digital tools could help continue to deliver public services remotely through online learning, telemedicine, and many others, and often in a more efficient and sustainable way. And at the same time, and this point will I guess help us transition to the next slide, please. The crisis has also revealed a number of divides, a digital divide for sure, but also a broader social divide that recovery policies need to bridge. And we can go to the next slide. We are definitely not equal in front of this pandemic. And many of the typically vulnerable groups have been hit the hardest. And I will go pretty quickly over this, as this was the theme of your previous city dialogue last week, as I understand. The elderly, of course, were by far the most fatally hit, and cities have put in place many measures to protect them and serve them in a targeted way. Migrants were also disproportionately affected, often because they are frontline workers. They often also have poor living conditions, and here again, I'm sure many of your cities have complemented national measures with further targeted actions to protect them. The homeless were fully exposed to the virus, and as we said earlier, it would be very damageable if we just push them out onto the street back once these emergency measures are phased out. And there have been many alerts about the rise of domestic violence against women and children during this lockdown period, with potential long-lasting consequences. And so in addition to these already known vulnerable groups, there will unfortunately be a rise in the numbers of the new urban poor because they have lost their job, their house, their income in the crisis, and require, urgent assistance to get back into the labor market and into the society. And so addressing all this will cause further burden on the public finances of cities, which have already been seriously eroded over the past months. And so this will allow me to now pass the floor to my colleague, Isabelle, who will explain to you why and how. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sojin. Isabelle, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. So the next slide, please. So good morning, everybody. So let's focus now on the impact on some national government finance. As you know, the COVID crisis is a multi-dimensional crisis with differentiated territorial impact. The impact on some national finance is also very differentiated from one country to another, from one level of subnational government to another level, and from one city to another. So the varying effect on subnational finance depend on five main factors. The first one is the degree of decentralization of the country, in particular the assignment of spending responsibilities. Are they responsible for health, social protection, utility services, economic development, etc.? Many regions and cities in Europe are on various front lines, but not in the same manner and with the same force, depending on their responsibilities. The second factor is the characteristic of some national revenues, in particular the degree of sensitivity to economic fluctuation. The third factor is fiscal flexibility. In other words, the ability to absorb exceptional stress, the capacity to adjust expenditure and revenue to urgent needs. The fourth factor is fiscal wealth. What are the current budget's balance and debt situation of a given local government? Does the city have set aside reserves and sufficient cash treasury? And finally, the impact on finance also depends a lot on the scope and efficiency of support policies or support measures from central or federal, and also from state government in federal countries. So another factor to consider is time. In fact, we can identify some short-term impact, but there will be additional effects on some national finance in the medium and longer term, and it appears that these effects will be probably much greater than in the short term. It is very difficult to provide figures today and even estimate. We are just at the beginning of the crisis and there is a lot of uncertainty. And at this stage, we can only characterize the different types of impact and only draw tendencies. So it is what I wanted to precisely to represent on the graph, which is on the slide now. You can see the sequence of events, the health crisis, the social and economic shock, recovery plans, probably a public finance crisis, and then the need to rebalance public finances and perhaps adopt fiscal consolidation plans. This scenario has already happened after the 2008 crisis with the negative consequences on some national public investment. We should avoid repeating the same mistakes done in the recent past. And for that, stronger fiscal coordination across levels of government is necessary. So let's look in more details to the current effects on some national finance. We can first distinguish between the effect on stock, some national government assets and liabilities, and the effect on flows, in other words, expenditure and revenues. On the expenditure side, regions and cities had to increase their expenditure in many areas, healthcare, of course. Cities in many countries are responsible for primary health care and basic public health services. Now cities have to participate in the distribution of masks and testing and contact tracing programs in partnerships with regional and national government. There is also a lot of pressure on social protection spending, it has been said, notably for the care of the elderly, children and low-income families, and vulnerable populations. Cities also have to adapt the way they provide essential public services to ensure the continuity of local services. Education, public transport, utility services, cleaning of public space, public order and safety. In the longer term, social expenditure will certainly increase even more, as they will include more welfare benefits due to the increase in the number of aid seekers. Recovery policies also, based on support to SMEs and investment stimulus packages, could also put pressure on economic development spending and public investment. Now, quickly on the side of revenues, the shock is and will be even more significant. In most OECD countries, some national government may experience a large drop in revenue, including tax revenue, user charges and tariffs, and asset income. In the short term, user charges and fees of many cities are impacted by closures or declining use of many local public services, such as local public transport, school meals, car parks, tolls, nurseries, etc. In the short, but also in the longer term, declining economic activity, declining employment and consumption could affect also key tax bases linked to the economic cycle. This could affect the performance of several taxes, such as the personal and corporate income tax and the value-added tax. Many other local taxes may be affected, such as taxes on sales, on real estate transactions, on energy products, on cars, on tourism, on local businesses, and even on residential and commercial properties. There will be a mechanical decline in tax revenue due to the economic situation, but the decline will also come from tax policy decisions taken by national and subnational government to relieve businesses and individuals, such as deferrals, exemptions, or abatement. So the strong decrease in revenue combined with an increase in expenditure could result in a scissor effect, and therefore in some national government deficits and increased debt. To conclude, some central governments have already started to estimate the impact on some national finance and prepare support measures to provide more fiscal space to regions and cities. This includes the provision of short-term liquidities, increased grants, relaxation of fiscal rules, or reduction of the term burden. In the note we published, we present several examples of measures to support some national finance: Canada, Finland, Denmark, France, Norway, Spain, Korea, etc. but there will be more examples of policy response coming soon with the update of our note. So in fact, to conclude, this is crucial that cities receive adequate financial support so that they can meet their responsibilities and actively participate in recovery plans. So now perhaps we can move to the next slide, which is the conclusion of the general presentation. Can I see it? Yes. So 3 main points. The COVID-19 crisis is global, but it hit differently across cities, with previous strength of cities sometimes turning into vulnerabilities. With the crisis poised to have economic, social, and fiscal repercussion in the medium and long term, cities need to build a new normal. And neither cities nor national governments can do it on their own. Shaping urban recovery and resilience is a shared responsibility. And the last slide is on the 3 notes that we produce in the OECD. The 3 first notes, they are currently being updated. They were published in April. So there is a note on the territorial impact of the COVID crisis and how to coordinate across levels of government. There is a note on cities policy responses presented by Sujin, and there is a note on the impact on local employment and economic development presented in part by Paolo. So there will be also next event on this topic in the OECD on the 14th of May on the COVID crisis in cities, a tale of 2 lockdowns. So many thanks to you. It was a long presentation, and
thank you so much, Isabel. Definitely a very interesting presentation with all 3 parts, very well presented by you and your colleagues. Yes, a lot to learn from the OECD analysis, from the economic impact on all sectors, but also the factors that make capitals at higher risk. The interesting social impact with the new vulnerable people, new urban poor. And there's been a discussion on the conversation box about which categories, which groups are also in the new urban poor. We will expand on that. And now this final part on how the financial situation of cities, the budgets are impacted. Just a reminder for everyone, we've also sent you an overview of measures that we put together from Eurocities based on what your cities had reported to us, what you've been doing. And I think it's very interesting because many of the measures that you covered in your presentation, Isabel, and also Sujin, are also found in our cities, of course, in Europe, about the help to provide liquidity to local businesses, but also support to the people most affected, but also how to make access to loans, pause rent payments, increase flexibility, and so forth. So that's very, very interesting. We already have some questions coming in, and that's very, very good. So if you have questions for the OECD, please put them in the chat box, and now we will tackle them. One question that comes recurrently is, in your analysis, has OECD looked into the impact on the real estate market? Because we've heard that there's a risk of cities selling their assets, such as the public-owned social housing.
I don't know if Paolo wants to answer. I think we are looking at the impact on the real estate market perhaps with our colleagues of ECO. Yeah. I don't know, Paolo, if you are looking on this aspect.
It's a very good question. We haven't produced anything yet on the direct impact on real estate markets. Only a very some quick views on the real estate investments that seems to be scared and probably concentrated more in the safest places, therefore in the largest cities and largest cores. But on the real estate markets, in terms of say the issue that was mentioned about selling the assets, selling the public assets, no, we don't have any evidence on that. Sorry.
No evidence yet. Very interesting point brought by Juan Manuel from Valladolid. Juan, I would like to give you the floor maybe to ask your question directly. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yes, we can hear you.
To me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's very much interesting, the presentation and the initiative. Well, my question is, we have, and I think it's everywhere the same situation. Big differences. We have very big differences between the cities and the rural areas or the non-urban areas. Having or an only regional approach for the analysis and for the solutions to this crisis, I think it's going to drive us to huge inefficiencies. So my question is if the OECD is or will make recommendations to the national governments to have in mind the city approach. The differences between countries are not just on the regional basis, but specifically on the city level. In this moment, actually in Spain, we are in the de-escalation plan, and the decisions are being made by just on a territorial or a regional basis, which means that places like the one we are, Castilla y León, a region that is very low populated, but with 1 or 2 or 3 big cities, will have homogeneous treatment when it is absolutely absurd.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question, Juan Manuel. Of course, if we look only at averages and formulate recommendations for national level, that's not very useful for the situation of cities. And I think this is why OECD looked at the territorial impact really to show the asymmetric impact. So maybe, yes, Paolo, you could elaborate on how do you use the evidence on the territorial impact, how the different cities, maybe capitals or other touristic destination metropolitan areas are impacted much more, and how do you use this evidence when you formulate your recommendations for the national governments?
Maybe also then my colleagues can complement on this. But first of all, I mean, I realized that the slides we presented at the beginning on the impact on jobs and also on teleworking were adopted, let's say, a regional perspective, so a kind of the geographical detail that is much broader than the city versus surrounding. I acknowledge that. This is, of course, this comes, of course, from the data challenges that we have in this moment. Being granular to the extent of really looking at the difference between cities and their surrounding in terms of labor market impacts is very difficult from a data point of view. That being said, we at OECD, we are always defend, let's say, a place-based approach. Therefore, it can be very useful. It can be much more efficient to differentiate by type of place or by, let's say, by the specificity of places, the policies. And in this case of the COVID, this is not an exception in many respects. But already showing let's say that my opinion is that already showing the territorial differences, I mean, is quite important for as a policy message for just the general message of having a place-based approach, because in some cases we observe that there is not at all even a place-based approach, but there is just a completely homogeneous across countries approach. In some countries this is the case, and therefore I mean, yes, I think we definitely support a place-based approach, but then we need also the right evidence to define more precisely what is the right scale of analysis and for what specific measure. In any case, there is maybe my colleagues on the need of let's say coordination across levels of government can complement. Thanks.
Thank you, Paolo. Yes, so indeed, we use this territorial impact evidence, and we will also be using that when we formulate recommendations to the European Commission at EU level. Now we have another question coming from Silvia Pintaritz. If you have looked into what's the share of jobs that can be done in teleworking and how many are in fact, because of course not all jobs can be done in teleworking. We have the case of healthcare and education workers and other essential jobs. When you've looked at this teleworkability and you've made all the calculations and some estimates, have you looked at how many jobs can be done effectively in teleworking?
So I guess this is for me again?
Yes.
Unfortunately not, because from a data point of view, for now, it's very challenging. It would be great to know actually what's the actual share of people that telework, but we use let's say the usual standard data sources of the labor force surveys, which come with a certain lag and provide only the, let's say, information on which type of occupation people have. But knowing whether effectively they work from home or not is something that can be probably inferred, but we are not there yet. Sorry, but I hope to fill this gap.
No, but that's good to also know where there are gaps. And I have another question from Klaas from Ghent. I will give you the floor, Klaas, to ask your question about the grants.
Well, what we were wondering is in Flanders, there's a long-term grant for companies who are coming into trouble because they can't do their business. But if they don't, they are not triggered to innovate because they are being subsidized. My question was, how long will this hinder innovation in the economy now? Because this is a very disruptive moment. And a lot of businesses are rethinking their business model with more telework, more business from distance and things like that. If you do not really trigger them to innovate by letting them live on grants, how disruptive is that in innovation?
Yes, perhaps just to say that there is a debate currently on putting conditionality on grants of subsidy provided to businesses in order they integrate in their recovery some important aspects such as environmental considerations or innovation, etc. So there is a debate. I know that in some countries some proposals have been made by deputies to include these conditionalities, but it has been rejected sometimes. So there is currently this discussion.
Yeah, it's good to follow this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In the next weeks and months. There's an interesting punctual question on the methodology. Does OECD have a toolkit for the methodology that you're using for this analysis that maybe cities could use and apply it locally to do a more granular analysis with the local data?
In so einer Telefonkonferenz?
This question came from Eric Thomasson. I'm not sure, Eric, which city you come from.
I'm from Leeds.
Hi. Yes.
Hello there.
Do you want to ask directly?
Yeah, it was just a query that there's a lot of obviously very good work being done by OECD, and it would be great if if locally, if cities such as Leeds were able to do our own analysis, but do it in a directly comparable way. So ultimately, we'd be able to plug that analysis into an international picture. So that might give yourselves an extra level of differentiation that you can then look at. So rather than necessarily having to do all of that data collection yourself at a global scale, we may be able to plug in compatible local models that would add that detail.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. I mean, that clearly shows interest from the cities to really take this further and use the data and really do the territorial analysis at the city level. I don't know, OECD, if Paolo, maybe you want to address this question. How do you go about responding to this big interest from cities wanting to take this analysis at local level?
Well, that's really, again, a question of on having the possibility of providing evidence at that scale. I mean, we require very different types of data, very, very different. So we are talking about completely different type of analysis, not the, let's say, traditional one based on labor force surveys, for which we have the lucky to have international standards, international definitions, and very comparable data. When we go to very detailed level, we have to rely mostly on administrative data, administrative information that have not often the, let's say, the same level of comparability, much more fragmentation and differences in definitions. But that is, I think, the way in which we can really monitor what happens locally, from a local point of view. What I'm saying is that to have international comparative evidence based on that, we need to accept less comparability in a way, and a little bit more lag of time in terms of being able to collect all the information, process it. But I mean, this is something that is on our agenda for sure.
Yes, but the question was whether you could share some guidelines of how do you go about this analysis. So in case you cannot cover the local data,
Absolutely.
Maybe cities can do the work, in their own department.
Well, in terms of methods, if the question was about method, well, we can, I mean, as mentioned by Isabel at the beginning, we already published a note on this, let's say, slides that I presented. It is very clear the method that we used is relatively simple. Once you have the data, this can be applied at whatever scale if we have similar or comparable data. And it can also be applied with different, I mean, using the more local data, making the same assumptions that we make basically in the note. And the note is from pandemic to recovery is linked, I think, in the slide, and it's publicly available in the website of the OECD.
Excellent. So that we can share with everyone. Also, I see interest also from Silvia, also from Milan. So we can share that also as a follow-up. So thanks again.
And also to complement, we are in our project, we are developing in some cases or for some country or self-assessment tools for cities, for example. We are currently developing this in Poland. So it is not related to the impact of the COVID because we started before the crisis, but it will include, of course, an analysis of the impact of the COVID crisis on the municipalities. And with these self-assessment tools, we try to look at several areas. For example, public investment, or it is managed at municipal level, and we provide indicators, criteria to assess the effectiveness of public investment management, for example. So yes, we have several tools which are more suited to the municipal level.
Okay, so maybe in the follow-up we will collect the tools from you, from Isabel and Paolo, and share with the colleagues from cities as a follow-up. So thank you for this very important question on methodology. And there is a whole discussion on the youth employment and unemployment. First, I will start with what Dave from Manchester was saying, that Manchester has started doing some forecasts as well, and they considered the forecast done by Montreal really optimistic. Their own forecast is looking at a shrink in employment from 8 to 35%. So Dave, if you are on the line, maybe I give you the floor for a minute to explain how do you go about forecasts.
Okay, I think just try. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very clear.
And there's even a video. Nice to see everyone again after all these years.
Hi.
I think it's very true what the colleague from Ghent said about the precarious economy, that obviously those will be hit particularly hard because of the hospitality sector supply chain. But what we found is disturbing evidence that many people in the mainstream economy, particularly in digital and creative, but also in professional services, advertising, things like that, are actually on short-term or 0 hours contracts or freelance contracts. And so actually it's much wider than people are anticipating. And what we've also found in many cities like Manchester and many Eurocities members, which have a very strong digital and creative base, that actually a lot of those supply chains are very fundamentally disrupted, because orders tend to come from capital cities or with global companies. There's evidence that a lot of those are bringing those contracts back in-house. So the smaller companies who are often part of that supply chain, who are very dynamic, are losing work. So it's not so much that their jobs have disappeared, but really it's the disruption in the supply chain that is choking off the future supply of work. And many of the government schemes do not apply to freelance workers. So the only subsidy for freelance workers is to take state unemployment payments, which are 5-10 times smaller than the support for businesses. So it's very early days, but I almost wanted to put those figures out to shock people, because this isn't about 2% or 4%. It's about 10, 15, 20% in the short term, almost certainly. And it's great if we can begin to get that feedback over the coming months through Eurocities.
Yes, very important, Dave from Manchester. Very, very good. You addressed the points here. And I would say even more, looking besides the freelance workers and the workers in the informal economy, looking at the increasing working poor. Yes, ILO has also an interesting recent analysis on how in-work poverty will skyrocket as a repercussion of the crisis, but also the discussion we are having now in the conversation box about the young people. Yeah. So there is going to be a knock-on effect on young people who may not be able to graduate because they are required to do an internship or an apprenticeship as part of their program to graduate. So that is already an effect, but also them not being able to have summer jobs, to be able to have some income to continue their studies, or to enter labor market, or even if they've entered labor market, they may be the first one to lose their jobs. So the impact on young people, on students, is also quite high. And the question was to OECD, we haven't seen this group covered in, when you presented the social impact. Of course, you covered elderly, homeless, and other vulnerable groups that we know, but young people and students are not mentioned. Do you plan to cover this in the updated policy note?
Yes. Hi, this is Sujin. So yes, I only presented 4 main groups for the sake of time. Obviously, there are many more categories of new vulnerable groups. Basically, what I said was that these are the traditional, vulnerable groups that are quite visible and that policy makers are paying attention to. But really, there's a whole new part of the society that is falling into this new urban poverty trap. And that both local and national policymakers will need to address much more and more, and really along the spectrum really of education. For example, all those children who are out of school and who have been out of school for quite a few months, and this is a vicious circle because obviously those who are losing those educational opportunities and losing interest, and this is going to have long-term repercussions on the rest of their schooling, and we know how much early education pays off in the social mobility later on. So this is quite a big challenge for many cities. It's just that, for the sake of time, I didn't really go into detail in this. And this kind of policy mechanisms is, I think, still at a kind of early stage compared to the others, which were sort of already in place somehow. And this might be covered, more prominently, of course, in the next version of the policy note. I might just take this opportunity also to clarify something about the example of Montreal. Because the city of Montreal, I think, was among the first cities to actually carry out this kind of self-evaluation. And so the results of their study, I think, came out in March, and so it's already 2 months ago, and so they might be revisiting, you know, some of the scenarios and the results. And as Paolo said at the beginning, you know, the impact really depends on your industrial composition and the sectoral breakdown of your economy and the labor market composition, etc. So there might be, you know, further news and unfortunately probably not better news on the side of Montreal either.
Yes, yes, it's good to clarify the date. The dates matter so much of the analysis these days. And also sharing here from the conversation box, Sandrine de Meyer shared that already in Brussels we can see that youth unemployment has increased 4.4% as compared to last year. Probably it will increase even more. So already we have some initial data on youth unemployment increasing, of course. Nina from Gothenburg had an interesting idea to share with everyone about the summer jobs, because in Gothenburg this is a very important policy measure they have in place. And they are adapting it now to still go on despite the pandemic. Nina, are you on the line? Do you want to share this idea? Can you hear us? Okay, we will try a bit later. Nina, can you hear us? Okay, I can see you're on the line. We cannot hear you, but we will continue then with, yes. There's a lot of interesting examples shared in the conversation box, and for sure this we will share with everyone all the information from here. This will become available so that you have all the links and all the good examples from the cities. So there was one more question that was on a different topic. Yes, about the public transport. So very interesting point coming from Sojin, how to use the opportunity to rebuild our cities to be greener, sustainable and more resilient. So a question came from the chat box, how changes in public transport can actually threaten the vitality of the metropolitan areas and drive many towards the decentralized suburbs. Have you covered this in your analysis, or is this a concern or rather an opportunity to use the changes in public transport to have effects on the metropolitan or decentralized urban areas?
Yes. So obviously many cities are now working on, you know, try to sanitize public transport and to reassure urban residents that public transport is safe. However, there are lots of concerns, of course, about, you know, how to use public transport in a safe way. And also there are just many urban residents who during the lockdown actually fled out of the big densely populated urban centers and went into lockdown in either the countryside or less densely populated areas. And there was actually a funny, well, not funny, haha figure, but interesting figure in France where there was this website, you know, one of the main websites that people use to look for new housing, was showing that I think 40% of the searches at the moment are about houses with gardens, and often either in the periphery of large metropolitan areas or in the countryside. So, I mean, we don't really have numbers or clear projections on how much new, you know, urban sprawl there will be over the next few weeks, but we can only assume that there will definitely be a change in settlement patterns. And so there's a whole debate going on, I think, among urban planners, and maybe some of you today are in this debate in your daily job on how to redesign cities so that they don't become, you know, places that you should actually escape from, but places that you can redesign and rethink. So that's, I guess, the whole point of tactical urbanism. For example, I guess there's a movement going on how to redesign urban spaces to allow for social distancing, while at the same time keeping what makes a city really a city. So I guess it'll be really interesting to hear also from the city experiences, I think, if you've taken any specific initiatives to reimagine, public spaces, and so that we still keep these agglomeration benefits in a way coming from metropolitan areas, and not undermine the benefits of climate action and all the benefits of coming from compact urban development that urban planners have been trying to achieve for decades.
Indeed. Yes, for sure. And actually, this will be part of our next part in the city dialogue. So if you still have questions for the OECD, please continue asking in the conversation box. We will collect them and find a moment towards the end also to address some of them. If not, we will also send them via email. Now, some of the questions will be also answered by the fellow colleagues in cities that already implement response measures to mitigate the impact, socio-economic impact in the city. A lot has come so far on the impact on employment and on the economy. A reminder that we will have a discussion just on employment, the city dialogue on 12th of May from 10 to 12, where we have ILO OECD lead department and the Commission invited, and a discussion will be there only on how to tackle risks for unemployment. My colleague Patricia Coetzee and other parts of our staff team will join you there. And now we open the city dialogue part, so you know the questions we've submitted. We want to know from the cities, from you, what's the impact that you have assessed so far, the effects of the coronavirus on your city? How are you going about assessing it, and how do you mitigate that impact? What policy responses have you put in place? And a very interesting example comes from Utrecht. David from Utrecht has kindly agreed to share with us how they go about looking at the impact in a comprehensive way in Utrecht, so that they can really plan for taking this opportunity to change and revive the city after the lockdown. So David from Utrecht, you have the floor.
Hi Bianca, thank you, and thanks Eurocities and the other cities and participants for sharing experiences. And please let me explain with the next slide, please, briefly and modestly what we are doing in the city of Utrecht on mitigating the socio-economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis. Is the next slide possible? Thank you. We started the task force for the societal effects and the recovery phase with a scope of second half 2020 till end 2024, with the goals of mapping the societal effects, have an inventory of possible measures to mitigate the negative effects, to keep an overview of the policy making and the implementation, and of course to advise the politicians. Next slide, please. And it is good to know that Utrecht has a long-term vision of healthy urban living for everyone, and we try to still keep on with that vision and the COVID-19 crisis. So we want to keep the long-term perspectives in mind. We do that also with the idea that it maybe needs a fundamentally different approach and a systemic change. We are working on it with quick scans that are based on facts and a combination of informed decisions, and that's very complex, of course, educated guesses. And we cannot do it alone. We need, of course, the citizens, people working in the city, strategic connection with partner stakeholders and governments, and also learn from other cities. Next slide, please. And therefore, we created 3 perspectives on the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. It's on perspective 1, vital economy, with employment, mobility, sustainability, and digitalization. Second, healthy society, so the health and risks, equal opportunities, and social cohesion and resilience. And third, attractive city, what are the effects on the housing market, the public services, and the safety. And last slide, please, with the question, what are the effects and how are we mitigating? I just give some examples. It's impossible to tell it all because it's an integrated idea we're working on. But as we see in the five-year economy, an increase of unemployment and the most vulnerable employees are hit the hardest. New citizens are hit the hardest. And we see a delay of urban planning because of problems in the production chains and less investments. Therefore, we see also risk on loss of jobs, increase of housing market problems that were already there, and a stagnation in the energy transition. So therefore, our perspectives for mitigation are to adapt in the urban planning programming with the structural effects of the crisis on digitization, working from home, and shortening the supply chains more locally. We are also looking how we can maintain our quite strong level of facilities local in the neighborhoods and the basic qualities of our city, and keep on working on that in new infrastructure. And we try to strengthen the future-proof work and also use the opportunities to get in contact with new focus groups we could not reach well. And on the bright side, we can also see that a crisis could lead to more innovation on the local level and the opportunity for government and us as cities to steer more. I think that's very interesting. How can you now use this moment to, because that was difficult in the past, steer more as a city? And what we see, a re-evaluation or a reappraisal of vital jobs. That's very important, and they are so important for the city, and it was difficult for those people to live in the city and get acknowledged. So that's very interesting, and also the local craft industry. Regarding healthy society, the effects, as in all cities is happening, hit some groups harder than others. It's unfortunate that especially families and citizens with financial problems, and we call it multi-problematic families and citizens, they will have more debts, more poverty, more health issues, criminality, and also the expectation of more pressure on the already oppressed healthcare, because citizens are extending their care needs currently, and because of the increase of care that is needed because of the crisis. So therefore, as a mitigation, we are working hard to keep the care guaranteed local and accessible at all times. We also try to work on equal opportunities, especially for the youth. People in vulnerable families could not have the right education. Some people had a way better opportunities at home. So we are now building an alliance for equal opportunities in and around the cities with the stakeholders, the schools, to make sure that in the future, how do we keep the opportunities equal? And we keep investing in our approach of an integrated model of prevention of those multi-problematics. What I said before, we really try to focus in an integrated way because it's not one problem that gives big problems in neighborhoods. There are several combined problems, and we try to keep the focus and not cut some things off. What we see as a positive thing is the impact on healthy air. It's a bit cliche, but it is positive because people are meeting online, and the local societies and organizations are showing a great resilience and flexibility. And regarding the attractive city, last but not least, a lower income gives problems, especially what we see now is for citizens renting in the middle class. That is because in the Netherlands we have social rent and the corporations protect people well, but we see also some sectors that are completely frozen, that are also in the middle income, like sport, local care, culture, social entrepreneurs, and hospitality. That means that we expect a future supply in the city will not be as high as it used to be. But for the housing market, we try to provide clarity to the market, explain things, and we try really to keep investing in fair, green public space services and accessibility. As we have seen all in the cities, I think that is very necessary, and maybe to become more green, fair, and easy, accessible space in the future with a new crisis. And regarding the services, we try to maintain the high quality. And for safety, because we see an enormously growing complexity and direct effects on vulnerable neighborhoods, especially, and vulnerable citizens. But we want to stay and let the police, for example, and also local organizations stay in contact with the difficult groups. The brighter things are less pressure on the housing market can help. It was enormous in Utrecht as it has been in other cities. And we see a lot of support from regional and national governments, companies and volunteers and initiatives and people. And I think it's very good to keep working together and hope that the EU and member states steer on getting better out of the crisis for the people we see locally. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, David, for sharing the approach in Utrecht. So what I personally learned from it is that if you have a very good strategy in place already, like your healthy urban living, you can adapt and integrate the mitigating measures on the impact of COVID without changing the overall strategy, but keeping your goals and adapting the measures. And I see you have in place a very comprehensive look at the impacts in vital economy, healthy society, and attractive city. One follow-up question from Titus in Leeds. What indicators did you use for your mapping? How did you go about, yes, the data and the indicators for the data to do this mapping of indicators? Of impacts?
I'm not very sure on the details of it, but the task force, societal facts and recovery phase, has people from all the departments being part of it, and we already have indicators that are used the last years and decades. That I think a lot of that are in line with what the EU and OECD works, but we are working on using the Sustainable Development Goals in the future also as indicators. But I'm not sure what the exact indicators are, but we already had quite a well system, I think, in order. So, for example, we could do a poll amongst 2,000 citizens on whether they sport less or not, whether they drink less or more, etc.
Mm-hmm. And Sylvia is curious to know, how do you actually go about assessing? How do you organize this work? You mentioned the task force in your city.
Yeah, the task force has from the director of the municipality, so the director board has got the 4 goals of mapping the societal facts, inventory of possible measures, an overview of the policy making and implementation, and advise the politicians. And I think in detail they are almost permanently in that task force now currently. Mm-hmm. I think there are around 10 people from strategy and public affairs until economy, social, are full-time working on it. Mm-hmm. And yesterday our prime minister gave a new national idea what will happen, and then this morning they were there at 9 o'clock to talk with each other what will happen. So it's
very interesting, because you already have this framework in place, healthy urban living, that gives you the opportunity to work across services in a very quick and efficient way, and also you are working with the SDGs. So very interesting. If colleagues still have questions, you can post this here, and then of course David is available with us until the end of the City Dialogue. We stay in the Netherlands and we go to Amsterdam, to Royal, to see how the capital city is, what's the impact there, and yes, what is Amsterdam doing to mitigate this impact?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Roel Raatrenk. I'm EU advisor at the City of Amsterdam. The policy advisor for Labour, Arjan, was supposed to be here, but he couldn't make it because of technical reasons, unfortunately. I will focus on. I will talk very briefly, and I will focus on the economic impact, and also relating to labour specifically. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, as already was said also by OECD, we are also hit harder than the rest of the country. So the expectation is that the economic loss will be 4% because of Corona, if the measures only last up until June, which is foreseen more or less now, meaning actually the prognosis was that we would grow for 2.3%. So that means that we have a decrease of 1.5% in the end. And that amounts to 1.6 billion. Mm-hmm. And this is just an estimate. It could go up to 5.4 billion loss, and that would amount to 5.1% growth loss. And that also amounts to 250 to 500,000 jobs lost. at least in this crisis, which is 31% on average. So that is huge. And yeah, that's mainly because of the sectors that we have in our city. So that's the hospitality, it's yeah, restaurants, bars, small shops, and also the fact that we have a lot of big offices which cannot operate fully. So that's all relating. Which is also a problem is that in all of the Netherlands we have a lot of flex contracts, we call it. So temporary workers, people who work as a self-employed mail deliverer, for example. So that's in all of the Netherlands, but especially in Amsterdam. So they are hit very hard, obviously, because they're easy to fire. And even though we do have a national regulation where the government will pay up to 90% of salaries, but this is paid to the entrepreneurs directly. Yeah, and obviously people who are less employed, usually they are also hit slightly harder. And also as a local government, we try to encourage the employers not to put people on the street. So we try to think with them, you know, to talk to them to see how they can keep their company going or how they can not fire their employers. And we do also have a 50 million aid package. And the aid package is used, let me see if I can find. Yeah, the aid package of 50 million is used for computers, internet connections for people who cannot afford it. It's used to exempt companies to pay taxes for garbage collection, for fees for advertising, fees for terraces, fees for markets. So yeah, that's the usual thing. I think you've already seen that pass by. And the fund is 50 million in total, but there's still 35 million which is not spent. So I'm trying to say that we are spending this money as we go. Yes, and then I want to talk a little bit about what we try to do to alleviate the pressure on the job losses. We were already planning what we call a mobility center for employers. And this means that we try to match people who are about to be fired with new employers which are looking for work. This already existed more or less, but in a new shape, it would be more proactive. So we would, as a local government, together with the unemployment services, we would actively identify which companies are looking for people. And we would do the matchmaking. In the past, it would be demand-based. So if the company would say, hey, we have these people fired, then we would only start looking for jobs for them. And this plan to be more proactive was already there, but now because of Corona, this has been sped up, and also the budget has been allocated. So yeah, that's a big difference. So for example, in Schiphol, big employers like that, healthcare, they still need a lot of people.
That's very interesting. This mobility center for employers, it's a very concrete measure, yes, of matchmaking and preventing long-term unemployment, which is a much heavier toll on the city. So that's very good. And also what you were saying about the income support for the self-employed. Earlier in the conversation today, we were identifying that freelancers could be falling in the cracks and would not get the same support, of course, through the national measures. But it's good to see that the city, like Amsterdam, comes to support this category of people very hardly hit, like self-employed and freelance workers. Very, very good. So just to emphasize, 1.6 billion euros is your estimate for now in loss in growth, and up to 500,000 jobs, which represent 31% in the total number of jobs in your city, which clearly is more than we've seen in other estimates that were shared today. So it's really a heavy impact on employment and on the economy. Do you want to share anything else, Roel, with us?
I just want to say 500,000 is the maximum of the estimate, 500,000 jobs, and 31% is the average estimate. And also, I would just like to add one more thing that we are also trying to see how, this is another thing we were already doing, trying to encourage lifelong learning, trying to have the job market more focused on skills and competencies. but this has also been sped up due to the crisis, but we're still searching there on how we can really implement that. And I would just like to also emphasize that we are also really looking for best practices. So if other cities, they play a big role in this matchmaking process between job searching and employers, then I would be really interested in hearing from you and to continue also with Eurocities. But please, if there are any cities here present, then either make yourself known to me or to Bianca. So
very good. Thanks a lot, Roel. Just to say, this came up also yesterday in the online working group of migration integration for a different focus, but also there they were saying that matchmaking process is the most important right now to identify sectors of the economy that are frozen for the moment. So people that are not working, are on unemployment, and those that like education, healthcare, and other vital sectors that are looking really for new workforce. So indeed, this is really an area we should explore more. We managed to connect with Nina from Gothenburg, that still on the same topic of youth employment and how to tackle youth unemployment through summer jobs and internships that the city is providing in a framework. So Nina, are you with us? Do you want to share this 1 minute with us?
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well now.
Perfect. Thank you. I actually did write a note about our initiative when it comes to summer jobs for the youths, since I soon have to leave for another meeting. But in short, it's almost all the students from high school that apply for summer jobs actually do get a job normally. Now the elderly care is, of course, off limits, so we had to find other initiatives and other jobs in other sectors of the city. And we also have created new jobs, for example, to keep the city clean, and also the parks in order. Outdoor jobs is perfect in this situation. So we also have I was going to write another example, which I can take this minute to tell you about. It's a local initiative here in Gothenburg, where we have today actually made a decision to provide means to the civil society to activate the youths in the summer, because many cannot travel. And it's focused on low-income areas, and it's also means to prevent domestic violence. And we want to activate young leaders in the activities, so that will also be a way of creating jobs. When it comes to high school, we do have a partial presence in the practical education, socio-economic courses. So they are actually at school, but in smaller groups and different days. So it's more spread out, but we have started that process to have more presence even in the high school. The schools in general are working as normal. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Nina. It's also a case of matchmaking and the city as a facilitator. Thank you so much. Now we will go and look for the next 5 minutes at the case study in Bologna. We know that the culture and creative sector is one of the most affected. It's a frozen sector. I like how David put it. There are some frozen sectors that could not operate under any conditions in the lockdown. And Bologna has done an analysis of the impact on the culture sector and has put in place some measures to mitigate this impact. So now I would like to invite our colleague from Bologna, Giorgia Boldrini.
Hello.
From the Culture Department. You have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me? It's
yes,
fine?
Very well, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see the slides, but it's just an inspirational slide, mine. So if you can show it, I can tell you what it's about. I think you are seeing a slide where we have one man standing alone in the middle of a square, and in the other part, lots of people attending a cinema or an open-air cinema in our beautiful Piazza Maggiore. What we were and what we are now. Bologna is a lively city, is a medium-sized city, is a UNESCO Creative City of Music. It has a big and ancient university. It has a very well-known Cineteca that organizes this festival you are seeing with thousands of people every night in the the biggest European open-air cinema in the main square for free. And this is how our cultural life was. And the man on the left is Paolo Fresu, a well-known jazz composer and trumpet player who lives in Bologna. And he came out from his house on April 25th, and it was the only event because it was the day of the end of the Second World War. So he stood in the middle of the square playing Bella Ciao for people connected from home. And it was really something symbolic, something impressive, something emotional that shows how culture, in spite of being frozen, as we said, has been in our daily life more and more. So there's an economic impact and there's a social impact and there's an economic role of culture and a social role of culture. I work for the culture department, but I mainly work on I've been working on CCIs. So my approach is very oriented to the economic sustainability and also the entrepreneurial capacity of the cultural sector. I saw comments about grants on the left, and that made me smile. I think we have to think about grants for the cultural sector in terms of innovation grants, not to let the old and tired system. I always say, okay, we all knew it was not the best system. The cultural system is made of informal workers, of low-paid workers, highly skilled but low-paid workers, have no proper salaries according to their skills. So it's time to think about innovation grants, not conservative grants. What we've done in the city of Bologna from the very first moment, because as you all know, Italy was the first one to be affected, and Emilia-Romagna region is one of the innovation grants. Someone likes them. Yes, that's what we're trying to do. And we were one of the most affected. We are one of the most affected regions, and we were one of the first line in times of time. So we reacted at the end of February. Schools, museums, and the theaters closed. You see in the other slide, you can see the numbers of theater shows, live concerts in the city in 218, 19, and 20 is of course 0. I forgot to say we are also a tourist city, an increasingly tourist city with lots of workers in the tourist sector. So imagine a city that from one day to the other has no students, which are 90,000 people in the city, living in the city from all over Europe and the world, and no tourists at all, increasing number of tourists, and no cultural events apart from all the rest. So what we did is to create an internal task force, let's say, with all the colleagues responsible from the different sectors of the culture department, one for the music office, one for the theater office, one for CCIs, and I'll tell you later what means presenza versus visitatore. It's a complicated museum stuff for Juan Manuel. And so what we did is, okay, let's start with the data. We were all shocked. It was the end of February. We are all shocked. And we said the first thing to do is to collect data because we will need them. And in the cultural sector, it's not so normal to think about data, but I'm quite, strange in this thing. So we started collecting data from the Chamber of Commerce to know how many people were employed in Bologna at that moment in the cultural sector, how many firms. We collected data, and we prepared this data put together with the measures at national level, regional level, and with any of our 50 more stable cultural actors in the city, and we made a report which we are presenting to the municipality, to the political part of the municipality. So what we did is to create an analysis based on data. We don't put our comments in it. It's figures, facts, and interviews to the operators. On that basis, we decide which measures to put in place. Of course, the city of Bologna has put in place many measures, economical measures like the ones OECD mentioned before, and I can send you the links. But now we are building some specific measures for the cultural and creative sector, as the ones I mentioned about the innovation vouchers for the cultural sector, to give grants not for existing in themselves, that's what mainly states are doing, but or state aids or things that, like, yeah, it can be considered state aid, but in another way, but giving grants to the cultural organizations and creative industries that are developing innovative reaction to the COVID epidemic, but that can last. So, for example, digital shift, new business models, organizational and management capacity, because as we all know, in many cases, there is a lack of entrepreneurial and management capacities in the cultural and creative sectors, and that's why it's not as developed as it could be. So I don't want to steal too much time to you, because it's a huge report. It's in Italian, but I can send you the link in the chat, and I will be happy to answer to your questions or to directly share with the people interested in the cultural sector and in CCIs.
Very, very interesting, Georgia. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, even during registration, we saw that culture and creative sector is one of the hardest hit in many of our cities. So your report and analysis is definitely a good example of how we can use data to steer tailored measures to help this sector. And innovation vouchers sound like a very interesting measure. Thank you so much that you shared, and please also use the space in the chat box to answer and discuss questions. We also now go to Vienna. Julia Peterbauer from Vienna also wants to share the approach from Vienna, both on the economic and on the social side. Very interesting, because Vienna is also a capital city, also a touristic destination, so there's a big impact also due to COVID-19. So Julia, if
yes.
you're with us, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, good morning. Well, hello from Vienna. Thank you, Bianca, for having me and for giving me the opportunity of sharing our insights. In Vienna, we went into lockdown. Oh, we could skip to the next slide already. We went into lockdown on 16 March. That meant you had to stay at home whenever possible, but you could go out if you had to work or support others or seek medical assistance, etc. But shops were closed if they were not deemed necessary. So we had only supermarkets, bakeries, pharmacies open. And as a result, hospitality, tourism, small retail businesses, but also construction are hit very critically in Vienna. We have seen a rise of unemployed persons by 41% compared to April of 2019, but that's actually the lowest rate in Austria. And the country's average would be a 58% rise of unemployment. We have 270,000 persons in short-time work in Vienna only. And we also see already 2.4% more recipients of means-tested basic income compared to the April of last year. Concerning the fiscal impact, we've got the Austrian Center for Public Administration Research, and they estimated on Tuesday that municipalities all over Austria will be losing between 900 million and 2 billion euros in fiscal income. So the Austrian Association of Cities and Towns demands an investment program in municipalities from the national government. Social life in the city has been cancelled for the time being, but as of 15 May, restaurants and cafes are allowed to open again, adhering to strict safety measures such as obligatory reservations, no more than 4 adults on one table, face masks for staff at all times, and for the clients whenever they are not sitting at their table. So we're looking how this will work. Also, shops have reopened in the beginning of May, and we have not seen a spike as of now, but we have to adhere to strict safety measures. Concerning the social impacts, we have the same as all the other cities. The differences in society become more and more prominent in Vienna too. So we can see that, for example, with homeschooling and difficulties for children from poorer families. So the city of Vienna has actually offered 5,000 laptops for a loan for children without access to computers at home. And another hot topic is domestic violence. And we have 2 institutions in Vienna which offer counseling and support to violent men. And these institutions have received 50,000 euros each right in the beginning of April. And we've had also more offers for counseling for women. So we see very many more calls at the hotlines, but apparently not so many more cases of domestic violence, which is pretty good, and we're happy about that. For homeless people, we've had the winter shelters kept open until August, and instead of closing them now in the beginning of May. And night shelters are open 24 hours a day, so we can give homeless people a place to stay. And we've also tried to support people in nursing and care. So, for example, around-the-clock caregivers got one-time payments of 500 euros per person if they agreed to stay at least 4 weeks longer than their usual cycle would be. And that was already in the beginning of April. But mobile care services are managing at the moment. Care homes were closed for visitors, but they've now opened again under very strict safety measures, and we'll also see how that goes. That's of course very critical. Concerning housing, you all know Vienna is very happy and very lucky. We've got our 220,000 municipal flats, and right in the beginning of the COVID crisis, the Vienna city government actually ceased evictions from those municipal flats, and other municipalities did that too. And in the end, actually, the national government prohibited evictions on the private market as well. So this is, I think, a very important measure we're doing on housing. And if we get to the next slide, what are we doing about mitigating that in the financial sector? Well, we can't draw on CRE or CRE plus measures because we have little room to maneuver in our ERDF and ESF programs. So we have to work with our own budget. And the city of Vienna has established a company called Stolz auf Wien Beteiligungs GmbH. That means Proud of Vienna Associated Limited. And their aim is to invest in companies in Vienna whose existence is at risk due to Corona, but who have a positive perspective. The capital volume of this company is expected to be around 500 million euros and 200 million euros from the city's budget. And the duration of the involvement of this company will be maximum 7 years, with the goal to stabilize the companies it gets involved with. Concerning life after COVID, however, Vienna is only at the beginning of the discussion how we're going to tackle this. We have launched the Vienna Economic Council in early April, where Vienna's business sector, trade unions and academia are working at designing the new economy and innovation strategy that's called Vienna 2030, together with the city government. And they're working, amongst others, on digitalization, innovative solutions in city administration, smart production, but also health also culture and creativity. And we're also looking into new subsidy structures here. So this Vienna Economic Council is also the forum where the impact of COVID-19 on Vienna is monitored for the short time and estimated for the long run. But at the moment, they're not quite optimistic, actually. Apart from that, we do have the Smart City Framework Strategy, which is our sustainability strategy. And somehow we hope that this might become our way to recovery, so that we could also draw on this sustainability strategy. And it's been only updated last year and now has the SDGs at its core. So we find that would be a great way. However, we will have to really boost our economy by making it resilient and circular, encourage job creation, and secure public health and social services for future challenges, and learn the lessons from what happens now. So that's why I'm here. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Julia. It's excellent, and we learned so much from Vienna. I must say that the idea of starting a new company, Proud of Vienna, with such a big capital of 500 million euros to invest in the local companies to stabilize the market, the local economy, is a brilliant idea. I hope it will inspire also other cities around the table. And again, like in Utrecht and other cities, I see two coming factors, that maybe three. You are using strategies that you've had before, like Smart City Vienna, to incorporating them in the recovery strategy for post-COVID-19, and also working really integrated with the business sector, academia, all stakeholders, to really find solutions and work together. That's really a very good presentation, and I think it will be very interesting to see also from Barcelona, who also has a similar approach in working with many stakeholders in a strategy for 2030, but now redirecting the focus on local economic recovery after the COVID-19. So Barcelona is here with us today. Maybe if I give the floor to Miquel
Bianca.
Rodriguez Planas. Yes, hi Miquel.
Yes, hi. So thank you for inviting me today here, and as you said, Bianca, I will explain how we are approaching to try to recover from the crisis that we are in. Just before explaining what we're doing, allow me to give you just two figures about the magnitude of the crisis we have in Spain. Our GDP, all the forecasts are saying that it will be reduced by more than 13%. And in the last crisis in 2009, the reduction was 3.1%. So we're talking about four times the magnitude of the previous crisis. So you can see it's a very severe contraction of the crisis. So to do this, to be being aware of this magnitude, we have decided to create what we call the Center of Coordination of Economic Response, CICORE, or SECORE in Spanish. We have created this group where all the managing areas related to the economy of the city are present. The aim of the group is to monitor the economic situation of the city and to establish projections that allow us to decide to choose the best decisions, and also to monitor our budget and how to answer to the specific questions on economy, to coordinate all the municipal actions with the other economic and social stakeholders, and of course to establish alliance with other administrations to strengthen the action. So the first inside of this coordination group, the first decision we took was a general relief on the payment of taxes and public prices related to our activities. So we have proof of this has been the postponement of the payment of the rent of public housing, non-payment of the kindergarten and public sport pavilions during the period of lockdown. Together with these measures, bars and restaurants have seen the tax related to the use of public space reduced by 75%, and also we have allowed them to use parking slots to put tables and chairs. This will be, of course, when the lockdown is over, because as you know, we're still on lockdown, and we have like 4 phases of getting out from the lockdown. Part of Spain will be out by next week. Barcelona city will take a little bit longer, maybe 2 more weeks. And what we have decided is when we move to phase 1, as it's called, now we are in phase 0. Restaurants and bars will not be allowed to have people inside the restaurants, but we will allow them to have more room in public spaces, and we will be very flexible to do this. So apart from these very impact measures, we also have created a fund of 25 million euros to support SMEs and self-employment people, with a very special focus on local retail and hospitality sector. Inside of this fund, we have deployed one specific measure. It's an extra income of 300 euros for self-employment losing earnings, and also we will use part of this fund to invest in different initiatives to help the transition into the online market for the local retail. But as you said, Bianca, prior to this crisis, we were planning a future where the economy should move more to a more sustainable in the economic point of view, but also in the environmental one, and also in the social one. In short, we were trying to move our society to the 2030 agenda. And we try to localize this 2030 agenda at the economic level. So now where we will have to put all our priorities. We have an economic plan in terms of Green New Deal, a Barcelona Green Deal, which will allow us to move in 10 years. Well, we hope it before the crisis to move in 10 years from a more related with tourism economy to a more related with knowledge and sustainability. To do that, we decided with all the parties in the city council to create an investment fund with the aim of enhancing the regeneration of renewable energy by retrofitting buildings and installing photovoltaic panels. And this fund will be secured with 50 million euros. We will keep this fund because we understand that this fund it will be a very important tool to dynamize again our economy and also to move to this more green economy. But on top of this, of all these specific measures, as I said at the beginning, the magnitude of the crisis is so big that we have decided to create what we call a pact or a partnership or an agreement for Barcelona. And this agreement for Barcelona, it's between all the parties, all the political parties in the city council, but also the main stakeholders of the city will work together during the next 3 months to define the strategic and structural measures that we need to implement for the next 2 years. And our budget, the public budget of the city will be based on these measures. So this is very interesting because we're moving to a more we're moving from a budget from the city council to a budget for the city as a whole, and where everyone will be working on it. We will have organization from the universities, unions, the big companies, NGOs, and research center, among others. And the 4 main topics about this agreement for Barcelona will be, of course, economic recovery, social solutions, rethinking the urban model, and how to enhance cultural, education, and knowledge sectors. So we will hope to have this agreement being working well. We already started last week. We hope to have this agreement and by the end of July, and be able to move to a better recovery thanks to this solution. We know that we need a very strong partnership and a very strong agreement to inside the city to face this big challenge. And as you said at the beginning, we still have a 2030 agenda strategy, and what we have seen from the crisis right now is that what we see is that all the challenges that we see due to the pandemic are challenges that we already knew in the 2030 agenda. The only thing is that what has changed is the priorities. Some things that were not a priority or not a short-term priority, but were in the 2030 agenda, now has had a rise on the top of it. So the good thing is that we have an agenda, a roadmap by 10 years, where now it makes even more sense to have it, to push on it. We're working on it, and we're coordinating the work of the 2030 agenda action plan with all the recovery.
Excellent. Miguel, thank you so much. And this is really a clear example of how you can use COVID as an opportunity. Clearly, it's a massive impact on your city, 4 times more than the previous crisis, like you said. But you clearly are using the coronavirus as an opportunity to move forward with your roadmap for 2030 agenda, and to get a huge ownership for everyone in Barcelona. I really like your example of moving from the budget of the city council to the budget for city. That's a massive step forward, and I guess it's really unprecedented. So we will follow with great interest, and we will connect back to Barcelona in the coming months to see how this is developing. So thanks so much, Michael. It's really inspiring. And I think the same is happening also in Glasgow. So Joe from Glasgow was saying that they are looking into developing something similar with a place-based approach, recovering the local communities and economies. So Joe from Glasgow, do you want to explain in 1 minute what are you looking at in Glasgow? If you're on the line, Joe?
Hello?
Hello, yes, I can hear you now.
Hi, many commonalities with Barcelona's approach, 2030 agenda, and obviously coronavirus has meant that some priorities have become more acute, and they brought together external experts as well. So that whole city approach has been fundamental to ours, and we'll speak about that hopefully in future. But a really important part is taking away from the kind of city centre kind of booming areas, trying to ensure they're safe, but also to raise the kind of local economies throughout the city too, and to involve them in what that will look like. So, you know, more greener, sustainable, placemaking a huge part of that as well. Safe, healthy spaces that become thriving again and aren't left behind in any recovery. Similarities there, happy to discuss further. And I think, you know, as Barcelona have said, the social solutions are vital to this. And as other cities like Bologna have made, cultural knowledge sectors absolutely, and innovation does have to be at the forefront. We have to stop doing what didn't work or what wasn't a good return on our money, especially for communities.
Yes, yes, that's true. And we need to really think locally despite the global pandemic, yes. And we will hear more about Glasgow also in the coming city dialogues when we get a more comprehensive overview. So thanks, Joe, for this teaser. And also we stay in the UK, and the final intervention comes from Bristol. They've just announced their local economic recovery plan, which is very inspiring to also hear about many commonalities with what we've heard from Barcelona. So I will give the floor to Anessa from Bristol. Anessa, please share a little bit an overview of what's this economic recovery plan in Bristol.
Hi, hello from Bristol. This is Anessa Creator. I work in the economic development team for the council. Hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'll give a brief overview of our approach to developing our recovery plan. So in Bristol, we've been looking at our recovery around 3 different phases: respond, recover, and rebuild. So as part of our immediate response, we've been ensuring that businesses and residents are supported to access various government funding, financial support and grants. And we've been signposting or coordinating signposting our workforce to jobs in growth areas, so that there has been a little bit of growth, logistics and distribution, and supporting our workforce to access careers advice, guidance and skills provision online where we can. We've also been looking at key asks to central government and lobbying for additional funding where businesses have not been able to access government financial support. And like other cities, we've been looking to assess the immediate impact through data. This has mainly been applying national trends to local trends within the city. So we know that particular sectors which have been significantly impacted are retail, tourism, leisure, hospitality, creative industries in particular, and education. And we have seen some growth projected, mainly in health and social care. We've also been looking at modelling potential numbers of jobs at risk at a sector level and the increase in unemployment and unemployment benefit claimants, all based on national trends applied locally at the moment. So that granularity of data, when it becomes available, will be really, really important. So we are now moving from response, our immediate response, to planning for recovery. And we are using Bristol's One City approach to do this. So we're lucky that we already have a One City partnership which brings together stakeholders and city leaders from a range of public, private and voluntary sector partners across the city. The One City approach is structured around some key thematic boards, the economy, environment, health, learning and skills and transport. And we've positioned our economy board to lead the development of shared priorities and coordinate input from across the city and stakeholders as part of our recovery planning. So our ambition, excuse me, our ambition is to position our recovery plan to promote sustainable and inclusive growth. So I hear some of this is reflected as part of other cities' plans. So it's been quite interesting to listen to the other cities' approaches. So we're positioning this around kind of three core areas. We want to address issues around economic exclusion, poverty and in-work poverty, and ensure that our plans are targeted to support communities and groups who we believe have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, particularly through overrepresentation in some of the sectors significantly impacted, which already are low-paid sectors. But we're also seeking to address some of the long-term economic exclusion which exists in pockets across the city. Secondly, we're building on the positive environmental impact by bringing forward economic priorities already identified in our One City climate change strategy, and that is around sustainable transport models, a cultural shift to home working where possible, green buildings and infrastructure as part of capital programme delivery, and access to green skills provision, preparing for green jobs. And thirdly, and obviously this is shared across kind of European global platforms at the moment, is around mitigation of the short and long-term impacts on health and well-being. So we need to make sure that businesses adhere to Public Health England guidelines as lockdown measures are lifted, as well as make sure we've got measures to mitigate further public health issues, including mental health. So we're hoping that using the One City approach will mean that the recovery plan is developed, led and owned by city leaders and partners, not just the City Council, and that the Economy Board, who represent different sectors within Bristol's economy, are providing insight on the direct impact on businesses in their sectors, but are able to identify priorities and mechanisms for recovery at a sector level. And I think that's quite important, as cities' economies are very diverse and different in their makeup. We're also using the One City approach to surface some of the tensions which will emerge as part of recovery, and a particular focus here is on connectivity and access to jobs through public transport and the impact on the environment. So going forward, how we brand and promote the city nationally and internationally We want to use some of these key priorities to engage with developers and potential investors in the longer term. And we want to use this approach to shape and review our regional industrial strategy and engage with government around future investment in the city. So I'm conscious that's a very broad approach, but I'm happy to come back at another engagement session and give a bit more detail around that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anessa, and this has been very useful to know how Bristol is also moving forward with the whole city approach to recovery, economic recovery. We've had in the chat box some requests. If you have some more information or some slides we can share to the participants after the call. I'm cautious of the time, so we will move towards the conclusion of the city dialogue with some final remarks it's very inspiring that after so many interesting interventions, we do see common challenges and common responses, the way to respond. Yes, we do see that, as we discussed in the first part, there's a new urban poor. Besides the vulnerable groups that are hit the hardest, there's new urban poor. We discussed about the youth and the students, the freelance workers, but also working poor, and the deeper social gap with the homeschooling. So I've also noticed that in the chat box, homeschooling is making the social gap even deeper. Economic impact is massive, so even besides the projections that are made by OECD, Commission, ILO, we see in our cities, the projections you're making at local level is that the economic impact is even more, it's deeper, it's more massive. But it's very inspiring. We see there are responses. Cities are very proactive, leading the way in many ways, and you are really taking a whole city approach. And I've noticed 5 common points. One is the use of data. And this is very inspiring because starting with the OECD presentation, we've discussed about how to use data, and there's an interest to use even more data for the local trends and identify which are the sectors, which are the groups of people that need most support and formulate policy to respond. Second trend, you are developing city using the city strategies you have, and we see also Tallinn is making the point that the UN 2030 agenda is being used as a framework for developing or redesigning city strategies to recover after the COVID crisis. This is very inspiring. We are also using internal task forces to really coordinate and monitor the economic analysis, economic situation, but also the social situation in your city. And very important, the strong cooperation with everyone in the city to build a huge ownership and leadership. We've seen that in Bristol, in Barcelona, in Vienna, in Utrecht. So this is really important to involve everyone and make them part of the solution. So yes, and take the opportunity to come back stronger, greener, more inclusive, more resilient. That's, I think, everyone's goal. Maybe as a final remark from my colleagues from OECD, Paolo, if you have anything to share, what you've noticed as a commonality through our discussions.
Thanks a lot. I think you made really a great summary, so I don't want to add more. I was just thinking that this discussion was stimulating. From my perspective, it adds lots of research questions in the future, things that we see from the chat and from the questions emerged that are particularly important to when looking ahead in trying to understand now that more and more data will come available. So as you suggested, there is the question of data use, but there is, first of all, the ambition to look more granular. So more granular means not only looking at what happens in cities, their surrounding, whether, I mean, the more granular, let's say, geographical approach, but also more granular in terms of group of people, what happens to the young, what happens to the migrants, what happens to different groups of people that could be hit differently. There is also another question, a couple of other questions that were raised that I think are very relevant also for us, and we'll try to look at it as soon as possible, as soon as we can, is the role of, let's say, the potential change in spatial patterns of people, whether, and I mean, there will be, in a way, a stop in the growing of metropolitan areas versus more kind of increase in population in more less dense areas. Let's say that could be either in the surrounding of large cities or even in more in the countryside. This is something that is very relevant for not only in terms of regional development more broadly, but also in terms of the policies that cities have to put in place in order to provide services. And connected to that, also the question on public transport that was raised, I think it was very relevant. I mean, now currently under the COVID, there was a huge impact in the local public transport in cities especially. And I think, I mean, here cities can have different experiences, not only, I mean, trying to, I mean, finding alternative solutions, but only in the long term, as you mentioned, the greener cities that are more resilient are also cities where mobility is easy and is sustainable and is safe. So I think these are, I mean, three questions that we should look ahead. Thanks.
That's amazing, and we're so thankful to you, Paolo, and your colleagues, so Jean and Isabel, for joining and sharing the findings from your analysis. We look forward to the updated note, and we hope that you can take in some of the inputs from the cities, and we will share with you updated overviews from our side on the policy measures in cities.